Hello, this is Devlog number 4 in my series of releasing a game before Christmas. In this video I will be adding my second enemy, along with basic combat, and also my first UI in the form of a health bar component. So the first thing I wanted to do was to add a new enemy, so I decided to add a fox, and so I used the wolf's script, which generates the mesh for the wolf enemy, and put it into an AI and asked it to generate an equivalent fox model. And as you can see, within a few minutes we have a functional fox model. It's not great, but it's acceptable for now. Then I had the job of creating a new enemy prefab variant for the fox, and creating new animations and hooking these up, and importing the new model made by the AI. Apart from this model and these animations, it's identical to the wolf enemy, as they inherit the same behavior from the base enemy prefab. And here you can see the new enemy prefab variant, the fox, loaded into the game. And this whole process actually only took me 25 minutes. So obviously this is a first-person combat game, which will require raycasting for attacking or casting spells or firing a projectile. And so this is the first thing I wanted to implement as part of the combat system. And the code here is just firing an array, and if it collides with anything within the max range, then it will spawn an indication object on the collision point. Originally I was using the map cube as an indicator prefab. However, I realized this when I took my collider off the cube and we all started free falling. So I implemented a standalone indicator prefab, which is no collision and will just appear on the map at the collision point, and it worked out pretty good. And then I just changed this indicator from green to red to make it more visible. Next, I wanted to add a basic combat factory, where in the event of your raycast hitting an enemy, it would deduct points from their health pool. And it does this by fetching the context of the collision, such as the attacker and the victim, and passing this to the new combat factory, which will work out damage reduction for the enemy if they have armor or magic resist, and then total attack damage from the attacker, from either stats or their weapons, etc. It will then apply this health pool change to the victim. And if that victim's health falls to 0, then the combat factory will send a message to the enemy manager to kill that enemy. And here is just a very simplistic implementation, where if the raycast hits an enemy, through the enemy manager, the enemy will be killed. Next, I wanted to implement a health bar as an indicator for damage being done during combat. This is something I had already implemented in my previous game. So it just involved importing a class called barstat, which holds a max value and a current value. So in this case, it would be the enemy's current health and their maximum health. And then these two values would be enough to drive the health bar. One of the problems I quickly discovered was a break in the hierarchy, which I preached about in my last video. So there was a relationship between the enemy prefab and the wolf and the fox prefabs. However, the relationship was missing between the character prefab and the enemy prefab. This meant when I went to update the base character prefab with the health bar, this wasn't being propagated to the enemy prefab, and therefore not the wolf and the fox prefabs either. This was pretty avoidable if I had maintained that relationship from the start of development. However, it took an hour and it was working as expected by the end of it, and here's the result. As you can see, the raycast collides with the enemy, and this will send a call to the combat factory, which will ingest the attacker and the victim, and then apply the damage to the victim and update the health bar. And once this health bar reaches 0, they will be killed via the enemy manager. And that's all for this devlog. I'm not sure what I'll be doing in the next devlog. Please subscribe if you want to follow this series, and thanks for watching.